hate-motivated massacres, including El Paso, Pittsburgh, and Charleston. The question is, why does this keep happening? And are we having the right conversations about hate to stop it? Professor of African American and Diaspora Studies at Vanderbilt University and author of Unequal, A Story of America, Michael Eric Dyson joins me now. Michael, I'm so glad you're here to talk about this and give the perspective, but this is a conversation that is infuriating by how cyclical it really is. The idea of the evergreen nature of the conversation about the replacement theory, it has its place in history, but also in the present. Walk us through a little bit about what this says about the state of race in America.
Well, Laura, it's always great to be on with you. Yeah, this is not anything new. In fact, what's interesting is that the white replacement theory comports effortlessly with Confederate theories of white supremacy and white superiority, with post-Reconstruction denial of opportunity to Black people, with violent reprisals against Black people for the unabashed temerity to have progress, the fact that you think you can vote. They were going to schools and burning them down. They were going to polling places and threatening Black people. This was 100 and some odd years ago, and it continues today. So as odd and as exceptional as the white replacement theory looks, there's a newfangled twist to it here, the explicit expression that we are fearful of genetically disappearing, right? We know that in 20 some odd years, white people will no longer be the statistical majority in this country. And when you tie it all together, white replacement theory, anti-CRT argument, the insistence that abortion be banned and that white babies in particular be born, this is all of a larger piece. And that larger piece is the fear of whiteness disappearing in the face of a worldwide global expansion of people of color. And right here in this nation, we will not be replaced by Jews, by Blacks, by Latinos, and others. That's part of the tragedy that has to constantly be dealt with and seen as a through line from white supremacy beginning before 1619 on down to today.
To be thought of as an American. Even recently, you had members of Congress who were tweeting the idea of the audacity of the government to provide formula to undocumented newborns and give it instead to rightful American babies. This whole through line is really there. But, you know, what often has the conversation, I know you know this well, what often follows is, this is not who we are. This is not America. You have the President of the United States as a candidate saying, I'm running to fight for the soul of this nation. But is there a fallacy in the idea that this isn't who we are?
There's a tremendous fallacious assumption that this is not who we are. One president fighting for the soul of America, another president fighting solely for white America more broadly. We saw this in 45 under his presidency. We saw the resurgence and recrudescence of white supremacist thinking, of the unashamed expression, unapologetic embrace of white supremacy. And guess what? Autocracy, authoritarianism, neo-fascism comes along. The greatest predictor for fascism in America is white supremacy. What is it when Black people are written out of the history and narrative? This angst about CRT. We know this is really blown up. 2 years ago, people didn't even know what CRT meant, but we're looking at the wrong RT. CRT, critical race theory, versus white WRT, white replacement theory. And the truth is that in this country, deeply entrenched in the bowels of this nation, is the belief that whiteness is rightness. And so the American Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights, the Federalist Papers, even though they are not explicitly in many cases embracing this white supremacist ideology, they are built upon it and rest upon its premises. And as a result of that, what we see going on now is the long historical trajectory of anti-Blackness, of anything that doesn't represent whiteness in its pristine, pure form. So yeah, we got to talk about the ways in which Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy and Scalise and others represent a spectrum and continuum of beliefs that are hospitable to and incubating of the kind of deep and profound explicit violence that we see manifest. I'm not saying they're the same thing. I'm saying they are on a continuum. There's an othering, there's a distancing from black people as humane agents of our destiny as citizens in this country. It's all of a piece, and it's very ugly for America to confront it. We'd rather think, oh, it's a bunch of guys in white sheets or nice haircuts who are talking about we will not be replaced, we will not be removed. No, it's deeply entrenched in the very bowels of American society. This is who we are.
So how do we go from this being perhaps who we are to who we should not be and who we ought to be? It's one thing to have the esoteric conversations that we all need to have to better understand the lay of the land, the history, the context, but how do you go from that to where we should be, and not, for some will look at this and say, okay, well, you're offending the First Amendment. I get to say what I want and feel how I want to feel. Just because I don't happen to abide by your principle doesn't mean that I don't have any right to say it. You got to legislate against me. How do you bridge that gap?
Well, look, the great historian Stephen Morris, better known as Stevie Wonder, said, first man to die for the flag we now hold high was a black man, Crispus Attucks. So here he was, a formerly enslaved black man, was the first to die for the freedom of America. Don't be trying to lecture black people about loyalty to this nation. We were loyal to this nation when this nation refused to feed us, treated us like chattel slavery, denounced us, dehumanized us, otherized us, and yet we stood tall. America has been at its best when its ideals have been articulated but lived out within the fleshly, concrete context of African American struggle. Only when black and brown and red and yellow and peoples of color come along to embody the ideals that America put forth brilliantly, but contradicted, paradoxically. Thomas Jefferson writing about the Declaration of Independence, but then owning human beings. So when black and brown and other peoples come along, it is in our redemptive practice that America is transformed from an ideal to a reality. Martin Luther King Jr., the night before he died, said, America, all we ask is be true to what you said on paper. That's what it will take.